Hi everyone. During my speech, entitled The Secret of Gloves, an important element of funerary clothing, 16th-19th century Poland, I will talk about gloves found during archaeological research of churches, or rather crypts, in Poland. Late medieval and early modern people wore gloves, mittens and gauntlets for protection and decoration in many different contexts. These accessories were made for men, women, and children, for workers, falconers, fighters, preachers, and lawyers. They exist in wool, textile, metal sand leather, made to fit, and sometimes lavishly decorated. There were social rules for when to wear gloves and when to take them off. They made suitable gifts and often appear as fashionable items in portraits. Over the last quarter of the century, textile gloves have been found in 9 locations in Poland. Some of these finds have been published, but some aren't yet. We can already read about gloves from Gdańsk, Toruń, Lubin, Szczuczyn, Lublin and Przemyśl in the literature, but the finds from Biała Rawska, Frombork and Wrocław haven't yet been published. I will start the description of these unique items with those that haven't been published yet. 2 pairs of knitted 5-finger gloves were found in 2013 during research in Biała Rawska, led by Dr. Artur Ginter. The first one are about 25 centimeters long. From the outside, a delicate decorative element is visible in the form of 3 thin lines shaped with an appropriate thread interlacing. The upper part is decorated with a geometrically finished edge. Microscopic analysis confirmed that they were carefully made of a well-selected silk raw material, probably by machine in a knitting withe. They were found at a burial of a woman whose personal details haven't been identified. At the burial of this woman, there were also found traces of a linen shirt, fragments of ribbons, shoes with a textile wamp, and an apron. The silk apron was made of 25 pieces of fabric made of the same 1-to-1 linen width, but with different densities. In addition, during the conservation, I noticed that there were repair patches on the apron as well as mending. All these observations confirm that fragments of fabrics were reused to sew it. It may come as a surprise, therefore, that the deceased was wearing gloves and expensive accessories, and the garments made of other items of clothing. The second pair of gloves, compared to finds from all over Poland, is distinguished by their size and the way they were made. They are about 52 centimeters long and very narrow. These are 5-finger gloves made in various knitting widths. The upper part has rarer stitches, the lower part definitely more densely spaced. Around the wrist, there is a geometric ornament in the shape of diamonds, made with an appropriate interweaving of threads. There are also seams on the fingers and 1 seam along each glove. The way of knitting is presented in the photos that you can see in the presentation. In this case, microscopic analysis also confirmed the use of silk raw material. Fragments of silk ribbons have been found in the coffin in which only single bones of the woman have survived. Perhaps the deceased woman was buried in a linen dress that had decayed. Among the unpublished gloves, there are 3 pairs of pontifical gloves in which 3 bishops were buried in the crypt of the Fromberg Cathedral. As the archaeological research covered only an inventory of burials and funerary equipments, I don't have detailed analysis of them. However, as you can see, the first pair are bright, silk, knitted gloves with an application or embroidery made of threads with a metal braid placed on the back of the hand. It's the burial of Bishop Andreas Stanislaus ab Hatten, who died in 1841. The second set, beautiful decorated red silk, knitted and 5-fingered gloves, I noticed at the burial of Bishop Christophorus Johannes Schembeck, who died in 1740. The last pair I registered in Fromberg are bright, short, 5-finger knitted gloves decorated with an applique belonging to Bishop Andreas Thiel, who died in 1908. Let us now turn to the find of gloves, the general description of which can be found in articles and books. In the crypt of the church in Stuttgart, where only inventory works were carried out under the supervision of Professor Małgorzata Grupa and mine, 5 pairs of gloves were found in 2012, of which only 1 was knitted. The rest are leather gloves. These finds date back to the 18th and the first half of the 19th century. Textile gloves were worn by a woman who died in the first half of the 19th century. These are mesh gloves, machine-made from dark green silk yarn decorated with a geometric pattern on the back of the hand. Gloves reached the wrist. They were about 18 centimeters long. In addition, I will show you long leather gloves in which a woman who died in 1789 was dressed. The inscription on the crypt, on the coffin, has been preserved here, so we know the date of her death. They are 40 centimeters long and have been tanned with the sweat method. The skin was dyed a dark blue color. They are sewn with a ring stitch and decorated with stitching emphasizing the lines of the fingers. But the most numerous collection of knitted gloves were found at the burial of bishops in Przemyśl. In the crypt in Przemyśl, 6 pairs of pontifical gloves were found and recovered. The archaeological research was led by Professor Anna Drążkowska. All copies are 5-finger, made with the technique of knitting from silk yarn. Currently, most of them are heavily discolored. Almost all the gloves found had the same arrangement of decorative motifs. There were 2 primary places where they were placed: on the back of the hand and around the cuff. In the center there is a pre-made motif, the monogram of Christ, surrounded and inscribed in a radial cycle. The cuffs are decorated with a fine geometric pattern running around in 3 different rows. Their length varies from 22 to 33 centimeters. It's very interesting that the gloves belonging to Bishop Walenty Wężyk had holes on the fingertips, thumbs and index fingers. Thanks to them, after putting on gloves, the fingertips remained uncovered and the bishop didn't have to take off the gloves while celebrating the Mass, holding the host in his fingers. There are also additional openings on the upper side, at the base of the bones of the ring fingers of both hands. With these gloves, the bishop could put rings on his bare hands. All gloves found in Przemyśl have been prepared for multiple use. Liturgical gloves were also given the function of an honorary garment, meaning the high dignity of the bishop. According to written sources, they were used as early as the 6th century by bishops in Gaul, and in the 7th century the prayer was said while wearing gloves. From the 9th century, the Pope granted the privilege to wear them, and from the 20th century, they were a permanent, obligatory element of episcopal paraments. They differed from the laity with their distinctive ornaments. Other examples of gloves are on the left, also silk items from Toruń. They are 5 fingers and long. Their length is 47 centimeters. On the outer side of the hand, a delicate decorative element was made in the form of a fin running in 3 parallel lines. The same pattern is made around the tomb. The gloves were placed in the grave of the woman who was dressed in a dress made for a funeral ceremony from reusable garments. On the right, short gloves from Gdańsk, 5-fingered and covering only the hand, with the upper edge reaching the wrist. The way they are made resembles gloves from Toruń, but the edge around the wrist is folded inwards and leaned. And in the middle, gloves from Lublin, which belonged to Bishop Michał de la Mars. They are also knitted 5-fingered. They are distinguished by the fact that they are decorated with an application made of golden galloon, from which an isosceles cross is formed. Another pair of gloves from Lublin, which belonged to Bishop Jan Trach Gniński, is distinguished by the fact that they were decorated with a monogram closed in a radial cycle and with fringles sewn along the edge of the wrist. So far, all gloves from archaeological research in Poland carried out in crypts are 5-finger items. Among the textile gloves, there are only those made of silk. Knitted 5-finger gloves were initially very expensive and therefore, apart from clergy dignitaries, were available only to a limited group of wealthy people. In the Polish lands, parade-worn gloves became popular in the 17th century, especially among women who wore them with short-sleeved dresses adopted from France. Men's and women's gloves had the same styles. We learned from Burgess' inventories that they were most often black, red, white, and green. They were more elegant in yellow and gold. Inventory lists also indicate that English, German, Italian, French, Polish gloves were in the Burgess chests. Thanks to this, we know where they were produced and where they were imported from. Gloves made of silk yarn or sewn from silk fabrics were very expensive items of clothing. Probably For this reason, they were rarely put in the grave for the deceased. They are more often found in the tombs of bishops than lay people, because they were part of the liturgical dress. Thank you very much for your attention.